I knew something was wrong the moment I heard him laughing, because it wasn't the laugh he used with me. It was sharp, careless, mean, the kind of laugh you use when you think the person you're talking about can't hear you. I froze in the hallway, my hand still wrapped around my car keys, groceries biting into my fingers, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. Then I heard my name, not spoken with love, tossed around like a joke, like I was something small and ridiculous. "Man, she really thinks I'm broke," he said, chuckling. "Let her keep working those double shifts. I deserve some fun." My knees went weak. 22 years of marriage narrowed down to a punchline behind a closed bedroom door. I stepped forward before I could talk myself out of it, before fear could win, before dignity could crumble. The door was half open, and I pushed it the rest of the way with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. There he was, my husband, shirt half buttoned, sitting on the edge of our bed like he owned the world, and wrapped around him was a woman in a cream blazer, heels kicked off like she belonged there. He looked up first, smirked, not even startled, like this was a scene he'd rehearsed. "Well, damn," he said, slow and amused. "You're home early." The woman turned next, confusion flickering across her face as her eyes met mine. She was pretty in a polished, professional way, clean lines, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who knew exactly who she was. She looked from me to him, then back again, her brows knitting together. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I smiled. That smile unsettled them both. I saw it immediately, the way his confidence wavered just for a second, the way her posture stiffened, her head tilting as if she were staring at a puzzle she hadn't expected to see in real life. Then recognition hit her like a slap. Her eyes widened, her mouth parted slightly. She stood up so fast the bed creaked, pulling herself away from him like she touched something hot. Her voice came out quiet, careful. "Oh," she said. "Oh my God." My husband laughed again, but it sounded forced now. "What? What is it?" She straightened her blazer, every movement suddenly precise, controlled, professional. The woman who'd been draped across my husband seconds ago vanished, replaced by someone I knew very well. Because just 3 days earlier, she'd been sitting across from me in her downtown office explaining what my options were after I discovered the money missing from our savings, after I realized my husband had been draining our accounts, opening credit cards in my name, telling me we were tight while he funded a life I wasn't invited into. She was my divorce attorney. "Mrs. Carter," she said, nodding at me, voice steady but eyes full of apology. "I didn't realize." My husband stood up now. "Hold on," he said, irritation creeping in. "What's going on?" She turned to him slowly. "I'm an attorney," she said, "and I was recently retained by your wife." The room changed. The air shifted. His smirk vanished like it had never existed. "That's not funny," he snapped, looking at me. "What kind of game is this?" "It's not a game," she replied calmly, "and what just happened creates a serious conflict of interest, ethically, professionally, and legally." I watched his face drain of color as understanding struggled to catch up. This was the man who called me naive, who told his sister I was too emotional to notice numbers, the same sister who helped him move money around, who told me I should trust my husband when I asked questions. Family betrayal doesn't always come with shouting, it comes with smiles and silence. I also just witnessed behavior, my attorney continued, that may be relevant to how this case proceeds. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. For the first time in years, I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't begging to be heard. I wasn't shrinking. He reached for me then, panic breaking through. "Baby, listen." I stepped back. She picked up her bag, walked to my side, and spoke softly only for me. "We'll talk tonight. There are things we need to address immediately." We left him standing there, alone, the king of a house he'd already lost. As the door closed behind us, my hands finally started to shake, not from fear, but from the realization settling into my bones. I wasn't powerless, and he had no idea how much trouble he was in. The elevator ride down felt longer than my entire marriage. My attorney stood beside me, silent, respectful, giving me space to breathe through the tremor that had finally found its way into my hands. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall, my eyes wide, my mouth calm, my posture upright. I looked like a woman in control. Inside, though, years of swallowed doubt were clawing their way up my throat. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly as the elevator hummed. "I had no idea he was your husband." "I know," I replied. My voice surprised me. Steady, clear. "That part isn't on you." The doors opened, and the cold December air slapped my face awake. I welcomed it, needed it. We walked side by side to her car, heels clicking in sync, two women bound now by something far heavier than paperwork. "I need you to understand something," she said once we were seated. "What I witnessed upstairs changes things, a lot of things." I turned to her. "Tell me." She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me about ethics violations, about how his behavior, mocking me, flaunting infidelity, exposing himself to legal risk, wouldn't play well in court. She explained how financial abuse and deception weren't just moral failures, but legal ones. And when she mentioned the possibility of freezing accounts, my chest tightened. "Because I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending I'm okay," I admitted. "I'm barely holding on." She nodded. "Then we move fast." That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a modest hotel across town, the kind with thin blankets and quiet hallways. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and let the silence wrap around me. No television, no phone calls, just me and the truth I'd been avoiding. I thought about how my husband had changed over the years, how he stopped asking about my day, how bills became my responsibility alone, how every time I questioned money, he'd sigh and call me dramatic, and how his sister, my own sister-in-law, would back him up, reminding me that men carry stress differently and I should be grateful he even stayed. Family betrayal cuts deepest when it wears a familiar face. The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. His tone shifted with each one, from confusion to anger to desperation. "You really embarrassed me last night," one message read. Another, "You think you're smarter than me now?" Then the one that made my stomach drop, "We need to talk about the money before you do something you can't undo." That's when I knew he was scared. By noon, my attorney had paperwork moving, temporary restraining orders on shared finances, requests for account statements, subpoenas in preparation. She moved like a surgeon, precise, unflinching. But the real blow came later that afternoon, when my sister-in-law showed up at my job. She didn't call, didn't text, just appeared in the break room like she had every right to be there, arms crossed, judgment already loaded. "You really blew things out of proportion," she said. "Sleeping with someone isn't a crime." "No," I replied, "but stealing from your wife is." Her lips pressed tight. "You don't understand how things work. He was going to pay it back." "When? After I lost the house?" She rolled her eyes. "You always make everything about you." That sentence landed harder than any insult he'd ever thrown at me, because she was right. In their world, I was supposed to disappear quietly, to sacrifice silently, to survive without making noise. She leaned closer. "You should drop the lawyer before this gets ugly." I smiled again, that same calm smile. I said, "It already is, just not for me." That evening, as I sat alone in my hotel room, my attorney called with urgency in her voice. "There's something you need to see, something your husband didn't think anyone would find." My heart raced. What is it? She paused just long enough. There's a second set of accounts, and your name is all over them. I had to sit down when she said it, not because I was shocked, but because some quiet, buried part of me had been waiting for confirmation. My attorney's voice came through the phone steady, practiced, but I could hear the edge beneath it, the kind of edge that meant this wasn't just bad, it was ugly. A second set of accounts, she repeated. Savings, credit lines, an LLC, all opened within the last 4 years. My mouth went dry. 4 years, I echoed. That was right around the time he told me we needed to downsize, when he convinced me to cash out part of my retirement to keep us afloat, when he started asking for my signature more often, always late at night, always impatient. I never agreed to any of that, I said. That's the problem, she replied. Your signature appears on several documents, but it's inconsistent. We're looking at potential forgery. The word landed heavy. Forgery. Not just betrayal, not just lies. A crime committed using my name like it was his to spend. I stared at the beige hotel wall, the pattern suddenly swimming. So he didn't just cheat on me, I said quietly. He built an entire life using my identity. Yes, she said, and he didn't do it alone. I knew who she meant before she said it. My sister-in-law, the one who worked in finance, the one who always volunteered to help with paperwork, the one who once joked that I trusted too easily. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed moments I had brushed off, her hovering when I filled out forms, her offering to mail things for me, her asking questions about my social security number like it was casual conversation. I thought about holidays where they whispered in the kitchen and went silent when I walked in, about how they both laughed when I said I wanted to go back to school, told me I should focus on supporting my man. By morning, the grief hit me in waves. Not loud, not dramatic, just deep and exhausting. Grief for the woman I had been before I learned to question my own instincts. Grief for the years I spent believing loyalty meant silence. When I finally checked my phone, there were over 30 new messages. His tone had shifted again, this time sugary, apologetic. Baby, let's talk like adults. You're letting people poison your mind. We can fix this if you stop embarrassing me. That last one did it. The audacity. Even now, even exposed, he still believed he controlled the narrative. I forwarded everything to my attorney. Good, she said, because we're filing an emergency motion today. By midday, she had uncovered more than either one of us expected. Luxury purchases under shell companies, hotel stays, airline tickets, a car lease registered to a name I didn't recognize, but paid for with a credit card opened in mine. My hand shook as I scrolled through the statements. I was skipping meals. I was selling clothes online to make sure the light stayed on. She let the silence speak for her. That afternoon, my husband showed up at the hotel. I didn't open the door first. I watched through the peephole as he paced, ran his hair through his hair, knocked again, harder this time. Open up, he hissed. We need to handle this privately. I cracked the door just enough to speak. There's nothing private left. His eyes darted down the hallway. You don't understand what you're doing. My sister's freaking out. Lawyers are calling. Banks are asking questions. Good, I said. They should. His face hardened. You think this makes you powerful? You're nothing without me. I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That was the lie he'd fed me for years. Get away from my door, or I'll call security. He leaned in close, voice low and dangerous. You're going to regret this. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. No, I said, you are. I closed the door and locked it. My phone rang seconds later. It's done, my attorney said. Accounts frozen, motions filed. And there's something else. My chest tightened. What now? Your name came up in another file, one involving a property you didn't know you owned. The floor felt like it tilted beneath me. A house? I asked. No, she replied. A shelter, and it explains where your money's been going. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? She took a breath. Your husband has been funneling your money into something much bigger than an affair. And in that moment, I realized the betrayal I thought I'd uncovered was only the surface. A shelter? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. The word didn't fit anything I knew about my husband. He barely tolerated charity drives, complained when I donated old coats, called it throwing money at problems. Yes, my attorney said, at least on paper. She explained slowly, carefully, like she was walking me across broken glass. The property was registered under a non-profit LLC with a name designed to sound benevolent, community-focused, faith-adjacent, the kind of thing no one questioned too deeply. My name was listed as a founding contributor, a silent benefactor. I've never even seen it, I said. That's intentional, she replied. It's being used as collateral, a way to move money, take loans, hide assets. I closed my eyes. Images flooded my mind. Nights I worked overtime, weekends I picked up extra shifts, times I told myself exhaustion was temporary, that marriage meant sacrifice. All of it had been repurposed into something I never agreed to, something I didn't recognize. So what happens now? I asked. Now, she said, we pull everything into the light. 2 days later, I stood in front of that building for the first time. It wasn't a shelter the way I'd imagined. No warmth, no welcome, just a cold, aging structure tucked between warehouses, paint peeling, windows dark. The sign out front bore a name I'd never heard spoken aloud, but there it was, etched in metal, followed by my last name. I felt sick. A man stepped outside when we approached. Mid-40s, nervous energy. He glanced at my attorney, then at me, recognition flickering like he'd seen my photo before. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yes," my attorney said smoothly. "You can start by explaining how this property is being used." The man swallowed, too long. "My husband," I finished for him. Inside, the building smelled of dust and neglect. No beds made up, no supplies stocked, just empty rooms and locked offices. This wasn't a place meant to help anyone. It was a shell, a stage set. I leaned against the wall, my strength suddenly draining. "I told everyone we were struggling," I said, "that I was bad with money." My attorney nodded. Classic deflection. That evening, my sister-in-law called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. "You're ruining lives. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I laughed bitterly. Lives, not mine, apparently. Another message followed, colder this time. "You won't survive this alone." That night, something inside me hardened, not into bitterness, but resolve. I wasn't going to collapse quietly. I wasn't going to be erased from my own story. The next morning, my attorney brought news that made my pulse spike. She said they're countering. Your husband's legal team filed a motion claiming you were complicit, that you knew about the accounts, that this was a mutual arrangement. My chest burned. "He's lying." "I know," she said, "and we can prove it, but it means things are about to get very public." I pictured church friends, family cookouts, women who smiled at me while my husband painted himself as the provider, the victim of an ungrateful wife. "Let them see," I finally said. "I'm done protecting him." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then there's one more thing you should prepare for." "What?" "They're not just coming after your reputation, they're coming after your home." The room went quiet. "My house?" I whispered. "Yes," she replied, "and if we don't move fast, they may try to force you out." For the first time since this nightmare began, fear crept back in. Not sharp, but heavy, the kind that settles in your chest and reminds you what's at stake. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival. "They can't do that," I said, more to convince myself than anyone else. "That house is in my name." "Yes," my attorney replied gently, "which is exactly why they're trying." She laid it out in plain language. If my husband could convince a judge that the house was tied to the alleged nonprofit activities, that it was leveraged, promised, or indirectly connected, he could stall proceedings, force inspections, even request temporary possession, not because he deserved it, but because confusion favors the guilty. "He's trying to exhaust you," she said. "Emotionally, financially, he wants you desperate." I thought about the house, the creaky stair on the second step, the window in the kitchen that caught the morning light just right, the living room where I'd slept upright on the couch after double shifts because my back hurt too bad to climb the stairs. That house wasn't luxury, it was proof. Proof that I had built something steady with my own hands. "I won't leave," I said. "I know," she replied, "but we need to prepare anyway." That afternoon, I drove home for the first time since walking out. I half expected the locks to be changed, his things moved back in like nothing had happened, but the house was quiet. Too quiet. His shoes were gone, his coats missing. He'd taken what he wanted and vanished. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, grounding myself. This was still mine, no matter what he claimed. Then I noticed the mail. Stacks of it. Court-looking envelopes mixed with bank letters, notices I'd never seen before. My name everywhere. I dropped onto the couch, heart racing, and began opening them one by one. Past due notices, legal warnings, documents stamped final. My hands shook as I realized he'd been intercepting everything, controlling what I saw, what I didn't. That's when the doorbell rang. I froze. I checked the camera on my phone. My sister-in-law stood on the porch, arms folded, mouth tight. She rang again, longer this time. I opened the door just enough to speak. "You're not welcome here." She smiled thinly. "This won't be yours much longer." "You should leave," I said. She leaned closer. "You always thought you were smarter than you were. We handled everything." "We?" I repeated. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. That was all I needed. "I have nothing to say to you." And I closed the door. I locked it, then I slid down against it, breath ragged. That was the moment the weight of it all crashed over me. Not just his betrayal, but hers. Family wasn't supposed to feel like an enemy. That night I slept in my clothes with the lights on. The next morning my attorney called early. "We've secured a temporary injunction," she said. "They can't touch the house. For now." Relief washed through me so hard I nearly cried. "But," she added, "your husband filed an affidavit." My stomach dropped. "Saying what?" "He's saying you knew about everything, that you signed willingly, that you benefited." I laughed bitterly. "From what? Debt?" "There's more," she said carefully. "He claims you threatened him." My breath caught. "That's a lie." "I know," she said, "but lies slow things down, and there's something else." I braced myself. "What?" "He listed a witness." I closed my eyes. "Who?" She paused, long enough for dread to bloom. "Your sister-in-law," she said, "and she's telling a very detailed story." My phone slipped from my hand onto the bed because I suddenly understood what this was really becoming. Not just a divorce, not just a financial reckoning, it was a war over who got to control the truth and who would be believed when everything was finally exposed. I sat there staring at the wall long after the call ended, the silence in the house pressing in on me like it had weight. A witness. Her. The same woman who borrowed sugar from my kitchen and advice from my life. The same woman who hugged me at Thanksgiving and told me I was strong for holding the family together. I had to laugh, but it came out broken. "So this is who you really are," I whispered to no one. By noon, my attorney was at my dining room table, paper spread out like a battlefield map. She spoke calmly, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in her eyes. "She's claiming you are aware of the accounts," she said, "that you agreed to let your husband manage everything because you didn't want the stress." "That's ridiculous," I snapped. "I begged him to show me the books." "I know, and that's where your strength comes in." She began asking questions, detailed ones, dates, conversations, moments I'd brushed aside at the time but now had to exhume from memory. Each answer felt like reopening an old wound, but I pushed through because silence had already cost me enough. "Did you ever authorize her to sign on your behalf?" she asked. "No." "Did you give her access to your personal information?" I hesitated. "I trusted her," I said softly. "She offered to help." My attorney nodded. "Trust isn't consent, and we can prove that." That afternoon, I received a notice from work. My hours were being reduced temporarily. No explanation, no warning, just another rug pulled from under my feet. Financial abuse doesn't stop when the marriage ends, it just finds new disguises. I went to my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the panic. Reduced hours meant less pay meant harder choices, groceries or gas, bills or prescriptions. I'd been here before, years ago when my mother got sick and I carried the family on my back. I wasn't going back there again. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I hadn't saved, but I knew it immediately. Him. "You're really going to let my sister get dragged into this," he wrote. "You've always been selfish." Selfish? The word tasted sour. I typed back once, just once. "Do not contact me again. All communication goes through my attorney." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then nothing. The next day, the court filing arrived. I read every word slowly, my jaw tightening with each lie. He painted himself as a hard-working husband betrayed by a vindictive wife, claimed I was unstable, emotional, manipulative. I recognized the narrative. He'd been laying that groundwork for years. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my attorney had found something else. She called me late that night. "We pulled phone records between your husband and his sister." And there's a pattern," she replied. "Right before major financial moves, right before forged signatures appear." My heart pounded. "So they planned it?" "Yes," she said, "and we can show it." For the first time in days, hope flared, small but real. 2 mornings later, I stood in a courtroom for the first time in my life. The room smelled like old paper and quiet judgment. My husband sat across from me, jaw tight, his sister beside him, head high, expression calm. She didn't look at me, not once. The judge reviewed the motions, asked questions, took notes. Then my attorney stood. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't dramatize, she simply presented facts. Timelines, records, inconsistencies. When she finished, the judge looked directly at my sister-in-law. "Ma'am, I have some questions for you." For the first time, I saw it. Fear. It flickered across her face, quick but undeniable, and in that moment, I knew no matter how this ended, the truth was finally cracking its way to the surface. The courtroom felt colder once the judge started questioning her, not physically, but emotionally, like the air itself had decided to take sides. My sister-in-law shifted in her seat, smoothing her skirt, clearing her throat too many times. Gone was the confidence she wore on my porch. This was different. This was official. "Ms. Williams," the judge said, peering over his glasses, "you stated under oath that Mrs. Carter knowingly approved these transactions. Is that correct?" "Yes," she replied quickly. Too quickly. She trusted us. She said she didn't want to deal with finances. "And yet," the judge continued, "we have text messages from you to your brother saying she's asking too many questions. Handle it. Dated 3 weeks before a forged signature appears. Can you explain that?" Her mouth opened, closed. She glanced at my husband. He stared straight ahead. "I meant she was stressed," she said finally. "She was emotional." The word again. Emotional. Like it was a flaw instead of a response to betrayal. My attorney stood. "Your Honor, may I submit Exhibit 14? The judge nodded. A screen flickered on. Bank statements, phone logs, emails, patterns stacked on patterns, a story no longer mine to carry alone. "Ms. Williams," my attorney said calmly, "can you explain why you emailed a bank representative from your personal account instructing them to process as discussed using my client's name without her present?" Silence. The judge leaned back. "Answer the question." Her voice dropped. "I was helping family." My chest tightened. Helping family. That phrase had covered so many sins in my life, so many moments I swallowed discomfort to keep peace. The judge sighed. "That will be all for now." When court adjourned, my husband finally looked at me, not with anger, not with arrogance, with desperation. "We can still fix this," he whispered as we passed. "Please." I didn't stop walking. Outside, my attorney exhaled. "That went well," she said. "Very well." I nodded, but my hands were shaking again. Justice isn't instant. It's a slow burn, and burns still hurt. That afternoon, the consequences began rippling outward. Banks froze additional assets. The nonprofit LLC was flagged for investigation, and my husband's sister, once untouchable in her confidence, was now being watched. But victory didn't pay bills. When I got home, the lights were off. I checked the breaker. Fine. Then I opened the mailbox. Final notice. My breath caught. Despite the injunction, damage had already been done. Late fees, penalties. The financial mess he left behind didn't disappear just because the truth was surfacing. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried then, quietly, fully, not from weakness, but from release, from the exhaustion of holding myself together for so long. That night, I called my mother. I hadn't told her everything before, didn't want to worry her. "I need help," I said simply. There was no judgment in her pause, just love. "Come stay with me if you need to. We'll figure it out." I looked around the house I fought so hard to protect, the house that nearly cost me my sanity. "Maybe soon," I replied. The next morning, my attorney called again, but her tone was different this time, alert, focused. "They've made a move," she said. "Your husband filed for emergency possession of the home, claiming financial hardship." My stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "He can try," she said. "And there's something else." I closed my eyes. "What now?" "He's blaming you publicly," she said, "at church, at work, telling people you're unstable, that you're trying to destroy him." I felt something inside me settle, not fear this time, but clarity. "Then it's time," I said. "Time for what?" she asked. Time to stop surviving quietly and start telling my story before he finishes rewriting it for me. And as I hung up the phone, I realized the next battle wouldn't be fought in a courtroom. It would be fought in the light. Telling the truth out loud is scarier than any courtroom. Because once your story leaves your mouth, you don't control where it lands or who it threatens. I started small, not with a post, not with a confrontation, with a conversation. I asked my pastor for a meeting. I sat across from him in his office, hands folded tight in my lap, the same way I used to sit when I was trying not to cry in front of my husband. The room smelled like old books and lemon cleaner, comforting, familiar, a place where lies usually came to confess, not to hide. I need to explain something before you hear it from someone else, I said. He listened. Really listened, didn't interrupt when my voice cracked, didn't rush me when I paused to breathe through the shame that never belonged to me in the first place. I showed him documents, court filings, evidence. By the time I finished, his face had changed. "This is serious," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry no one protected you." Those words hit me harder than any accusation ever had. The next step came faster than I expected. A woman from church, someone I barely spoke to beyond polite hugs, called me that afternoon. "I heard some things," she said cautiously, "and I didn't believe them, so I wanted to ask you directly." That's how it started, one conversation at a time. No drama, no theatrics, just facts. Truth doesn't need volume when it has weight. But my husband panicked when he realized the narrative was slipping. He showed up at my job, not inside, security wouldn't allow it, but close enough that coworkers noticed, close enough to humiliate me. He stood by my car after my shift ended, arms crossed, like he was waiting for what he believed was still his. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said as I approached. "People are talking." "Yes," I replied calmly. "They are." "You think you're winning?" he scoffed. "Look at you, reduced hours, barely holding on." I met his eyes. "You mistook my struggle for weakness." His jaw tightened. "You wouldn't survive without me." I smiled, not the soft smile from before, but something firmer, grounded. "I already am," I said. He stepped closer. "Drop the case. We'll start over." I shook my head. "No." Something dark flickered across his face then. "You're going to regret this." I leaned in just enough that only he could hear me. "You already lost," I said. "You just don't know how much yet." That night, my attorney sent me a draft statement, not for social media, for court, for record, for protection. But reading it did something unexpected. It reminded me who I was before I became someone's quiet wife, before I apologized for asking questions, before I believed love required endurance. I rewrote parts of it in my own words, my truth, my voice. The next morning, my attorney called with urgency again. "They've uncovered something about the nonprofit." My pulse quickened. "What now?" "It was never meant to function, but donations were solicited in your name." My stomach twisted. "Donations?" "Yes," she replied, "which means this isn't just a civil matter anymore." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "You're saying—" "I'm saying investigators are getting involved," she finished, "and your husband knows it." As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed. A text from him. "We need to talk, now, before this gets worse." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, because for the first time since I married him, the fear had finally switched sides, and I knew whatever he was about to say wouldn't be an apology. It would be a confession or a threat. I didn't answer him right away. For years, I'd been trained to respond on his schedule, soothe his moods, anticipate his needs. That reflex still lived somewhere deep in me, but I was learning how to quiet it. When I finally replied, I kept it short. Send it through my attorney. Seconds later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through strained, urgent, stripped of the charm he used when he thought he was in control. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "People are asking questions. This is bigger than us now." I deleted it. That afternoon, I met my attorney downtown. Her office felt different than it had the first day I walked in, like a place of strategy now, not just survival. She slid a folder across the table, thicker than anything I had seen so far. "Federal interest," she said, "potential wire fraud, identity theft, charitable solicitation violations." Each phrase landed like a drumbeat. "And me?" I asked quietly. "Where does that leave me?" She met my eyes. As a victim. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For so long, I'd carried guilt like it was proof of responsibility. But the stress was catching up to me anyway. 2 weeks of restless nights, headaches that wouldn't fade, panic that crept in when I stood in grocery store aisles counting dollars. I'd lost weight without trying. My reflection looked older, tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. When my reduced paycheck hit my account, I cried in my car. Not because it was small, but because I knew how hard I'd worked for every cent. That evening, I went to my mother's house. She hugged me long and tight, like she could press the fear out of my bones. "You don't have to be strong here," she whispered. I slept in my childhood room that night, woke up to sunlight on the same walls that once held my dreams, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe. The safety didn't last. The next morning, my attorney called. "They're attempting to subpoena you," she said, "fishing, trying to intimidate." My stomach dropped. "Can they do that?" "Yes," she replied, "but we're prepared." As if on cue, my sister-in-law sent a message. "You never had to do this. We could have protected you." I stared at the words, shaking. Protected me? From what? The truth? I blocked her. Later that day, news reached me through a friend. My husband had been asked to step down from a volunteer leadership role. Whispers followed him now. The same people who once praised him avoided eye contact. And still, he blamed me. That night, I received one last message from him, longer than the others, different. He wrote, "I never meant for it to go this far. I was trying to build something for us. You always doubted me. You forced my hand." The manipulation was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. But something else caught my eye. One line, careless, revealing. I just needed more time before the audit. I forwarded it to my attorney without responding. Her reply came fast. "That may be the mistake that ends this." I sat on my mother's couch, phone in my hand, heart pounding not with fear, but with anticipation, because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next blow. I was waiting for the collapse. And deep down, I knew it was coming. The collapse didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, small, sharp sounds like cracks in ice, each one signaling that something heavy underneath was finally giving way. My attorney called early the next morning, too early, the kind of call that jolts you awake before your body catches up. "They served him," she said. I sat up in my mother's guest bed, heart pounding. "Served him how?" "Investigators," she replied, "at his job." I closed my eyes. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just breathed, because justice isn't about joy. It's about balance, about truth finding its footing. "They've seized records," she continued, "phones, laptops, financial documents, and the nonprofit accounts are officially under audit." My mind flashed to all the nights he came home late, tossing his phone face down on the table, snapping when I asked simple questions. All the times I told myself love meant trust, even when trust felt like erasing myself. "And the house?" I asked quietly. "Still protected, for now." That afternoon, my husband tried one last time to reach me, not with threats, not with charm, with fear. He called my mother's house, left a message on the landline like it was 1995. His voice shook. "Please," he said, "tell her I need to talk. I can explain." My mother looked at me from across the kitchen table, eyes steady. "Do you want me to respond?" I shook my head. "No." She nodded. "Good." Later that day, my attorney forwarded me an update that made my stomach twist. His sister had hired separate counsel. "She's distancing herself," my attorney explained, which means she's preparing to protect herself. I thought about all the times she told me family sticks together, all the times she'd smiled while standing on my back. Family only sticks together when it's convenient. That evening, I drove back to my house for the first time since staying with my mother. I needed clothes, papers, proof of my life. I parked slowly, scanning the street like I was trespassing in my own space. Inside, the house felt different, emptier, lighter, like it had exhaled. I gathered documents, photos, pieces of myself I'd left scattered while surviving. And that's when I found it, tucked into a drawer I rarely opened. A notebook. His handwriting. Pages of calculations, dates, notes about transfers, buffers, delay tactics. A margin note circled in red. "Keep her distracted." My hands trembled as I flipped through it. There it was, the truth in ink. Not my imagination, not my emotions. Evidence. I photographed every page and sent it to my attorney. Her response came almost immediately. "This changes everything." That night, as I lay back in my childhood bed again, exhaustion finally pulled me under. But even in sleep, my body stayed alert, like it was waiting for the last shoe to drop. It did the next morning. My attorney's voice was calm, but there was no hiding the weight of her words. "He's been formally charged. Multiple counts." I swallowed hard. "And me?" "You're being cleared," she replied, "officially." I stared at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into my hair. Cleared. After years of carrying blame that was never mine, I was finally being named for what I was, a survivor. But before I could even process that relief, she added one more thing. "He's trying to make a deal, and he wants to speak to you through mediation." My chest tightened, because I knew whatever he had left to say wouldn't be about remorse. It would be about control. And the hardest test of my healing was still ahead. I almost said no. That was my first instinct when my attorney mentioned mediation. A sharp, protective no that rose up from a place that had learned the hard way what access to him cost me. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, shoulders tight, jaw locked, pulse racing like danger was already in the room. "I don't owe him anything," I said. "You don't," she agreed, "and you're not required to attend, but there may be value in letting him speak on record." On record. Those words mattered. We scheduled it for the following week. Neutral office, glass walls, no private corners. He wouldn't be allowed near me physically, and every word would be documented. I told myself I was doing this for closure, for strategy. But the truth was, I needed to see him stripped of the power he once held over me. I needed to know that the man who reduced me to silence could no longer control the room. When I walked in, he was already there. He looked smaller, not physically, but energetically. His suit hung a little looser, his eyes darted instead of commanded. The confidence that once filled space had collapsed inward, replaced by something brittle and desperate. He stood when he saw me. "Hey." I didn't respond. I sat down across from him, my attorney at my side, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I felt grounded, rooted, like I finally belonged in my own body again. He cleared his throat. "I never wanted to hurt you." I almost laughed. Almost. "You built an entire lie around me," I said quietly. "You hurt me every day." His eyes flashed. "You never supported my vision." "There it is," I replied, still blaming me. The mediator gently redirected the conversation, but he kept circling back, minimizing, reframing, searching for cracks in my resolution. At one point, he leaned forward, voice low. "If you cooperate," he said, "this could all go away. We could protect what's left." "What's left of what?" I asked. "Your reputation?" He flinched. I watched him realize, slowly, painfully, that I wasn't afraid anymore, that I wasn't seeking approval, that I didn't need him to validate my reality. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list every wound. I said one thing. "I want my name back." Silence filled the room. "My credit, my identity, my story," I continued. "You don't get to use me anymore." The mediator nodded. My attorney placed a hand gently on my arm. The session ended without an agreement. He looked stunned as I stood to leave, not angry, not defiant, defeated. Outside, the winter air felt clean in my lungs. I realized then that closure doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it comes from witnessing someone lose the power they once wielded over you. That night, I packed the last of my things from the house. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I walked through each room with gratitude instead of grief. I left the key on the counter and closed the door behind me. 2 days later, my attorney called with final updates. His plea deal was accepted, she said. Restitution, asset forfeiture, and a permanent record. I sat down slowly. "And the house?" She replied, "You can sell it or keep the equity. It's yours." Mine. The words settled into me like warmth. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my face. The lines were still there, the tiredness hadn't vanished, but something else had arrived. Peace. One more step remained, one final reckoning, not with him, but with the part of myself that believed love meant endurance at the expense of dignity, and I was ready for it. I didn't wake up healed the next morning. Healing doesn't work like that. It isn't a light switch. It's a muscle you rebuild slowly, one honest choice at a time. I woke up in my mother's house, sunlight spilling across the floor, the smell of coffee drifting down the hallway. For the first time in a long time, my body wasn't bracing for impact. No phone buzzing with threats, no lies waiting to be uncovered, no man standing between me and my own peace. Just quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with my mother, our hands wrapped around warm mugs, and let myself be her daughter again instead of everyone's shield. "You did good," she said softly. I shook my head. I survived. She smiled at me in that knowing way mothers do. "You did more than that." Over the next weeks, the legal dust settled. Restitution payments were ordered, accounts were corrected, my credit slowly began to breathe again. It wasn't instant relief, but it was progress. Real, documented, undeniable progress. I sold the house. Not because it was taken from me, but because I chose not to drag my future through rooms haunted by betrayal. Letting go wasn't defeat, it was intention. With the equity, I paid off debts I never created. I downsized on my own terms, a small apartment with light-filled windows and neighbors who didn't know my past and didn't need to. I went back to work full-time, not because I had to prove anything, but because I trusted myself again. I started budgeting without fear, asking questions without apology, saying no without explanation. The hardest part wasn't rebuilding financially. It was forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for trusting, for loving deeply, for believing family meant protection. I had to unlearn the lie that strength looks like silence, that loyalty requires suffering, that a good woman endures quietly. Strength, I learned, looks like boundaries. Healing looks like truth. Dignity looks like walking away when staying costs too much of your soul. Months later, I ran into someone from church at the grocery store. She hesitated before speaking, like she didn't know which version of me she was allowed to address. "You seem lighter," she said finally. "I am," I replied. Because I no longer carried shame that didn't belong to me, because I no longer defended lies told at my expense, because I no longer confused endurance with love. I don't hate my ex-husband. Hate would tie me to him longer than he deserves. I see him clearly now, for what he was and what he lost. Control, access, a woman who loved fiercely and stood back up when pushed down. And I see myself even more clearly. A black woman who survived financial betrayal, a wife who became a witness and then a victor, a woman who learned that revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands tall and walks forward. If my story taught me anything, it's this. When someone underestimates you, let them. Just don't stay small long enough to believe them. I didn't win because he fell. I won because I rose. If you learned something new from my life story, please like this video, subscribe to join our community for more stories like mine, and comment down below where you're watching this video from. I'd truly love to know.